Welcome back, everyone, back to Crack the Code podcast. Today, we brought back our friend Jennifer Arthurton. Jennifer is the founder and creator of Old Chicks No Shit, a community and podcast designed to inspire and support midlife women in chasing their dreams and creating their kick-ass next chapter. Jennifer is a midlife mentor, podcast host, writer, and speaker. Having made her own midlife course corrections, she's a passionate advocate of the inherent power and wisdom that women possess at a time when they often feel overlooked in society and doubt themselves most. Jennifer regularly appears as a guest on blogs and podcasts and as a speaker at women's events. So welcome back, Jennifer.
Thanks again for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to hear some more of your story because I know you have an amazing story. I love listening to your podcast. Old
Thank
Chicks
you.
No Shit. I love the title of that because I think sometimes women forget that they do know a lot of shit.
Yeah.
You know, we're mature, we've done a lot of stuff, and even women who sometimes think they don't know that much because they've stayed home to raise kids and maybe haven't gotten into the corporate world, they might not think that they know stuff, and they do, and they have a lot of wisdom to share. So I'm excited to hear some more about your journey and to give them some inspiration if they want to do something more exciting for the next part of their life.
Always happy to share.
Yeah. So what inspired you to, make a shift? Because I know you used to be in the corporate world and you've done a total shift from where you were.
Yeah. I wish I could say that I was inspired to shift.
Yeah.
That's actually not the way that it happened. So I have, as you mentioned, I had a long, like 30-year career in the corporate world. I had a great job with lots of perks, and I traveled. I was a wife. I was a mother. Doing all of the busy mom stuff. I had a passion for health and fitness as my hobby. And my life was really, really busy. And what would happen to me is every once in a while, I would be in a boardroom meeting and I would look around the table at the people who are in the room with me. And I'd be thinking to myself, like, I'd be half listening to what's going on and thinking to myself, is this it? It's like, this is what I really wanted, and, as quickly as it would come up, I would push it away because quite frankly, like I didn't have an answer to that question. And quite frankly, any possible answer like scared the crap out of me. And I was like, okay, I don't have time to deal with this. Like, park it. I got stuff to do. Let's move on. And this went on kind of in this cycle for a number of years. And then in the year leading up to my 50th birthday, life, universe, God, whatever word you want to use, had other plans for me. And I found myself divorced, unemployed, an empty nester, and I was bedridden with a stress-related illness. Okay. So basically, all of the identities of who I thought I was in the world had been stripped away from me. And what was, that was scary. But what was really even scarier was the fact that I had no idea who I was if I wasn't a wife, a mother, a corporate executive. And even, like I was too sick to work out, although I tried to until my trainer fired me, but that's a whole other story, right?
Yeah.
But it was just like everything that kept me busy, everything that kept me distracted from who I was literally taken away within a short space of time. It was like somebody pulled the plug on my life. And there I was, too sick to get out of bed, laying there having to contemplate, like, okay, what's next? Like, where do I go from here? And I would lie there staring at the ceiling asking, like, what do I want? Like, what's even possible? Can I even do this? And I had the mantra, all of the mantras fed to us by the limiting cultural beliefs about, nobody starts over at 50. Like, I'm supposed to be riding off into the retirement sunset, with on the arm of a handsome man and a pot of retirement gold under my arm.
Yeah.
That's not my reality. Right? Like, nobody, I'm never going to be in another relationship again who wants a 50-year-old woman. Like, nobody will hire a 50, like, it's too late. I'm not capable. Like, I sat there and I wallowed in it all, right? Because that's all I knew. And then at some point, I kind of got tired of my own crap and I put on my big girl pants and I decided that, what life had handed me was actually a bit of a gift. right? Like I was on this path that I really wasn't sure about. Like I kept questioning it, right? But I also knew that I wasn't going to make a change on my own unless I was kind of forced into that place. And
Mm.
that's what happened. I was forced into this place of stillness, right? And I realized that I saw that to be a bit of a gift to be able to figure out who I was, like what was important to me, what mattered to me, who I was as a person, and also to figure out like what do I want next? What do I want my life to mean? Right. So it was a
Mm-hmm.
big space was created for me to be able to answer all of those questions. And I remember, at the beginning, at the very beginning of my journey, I had felt really compelled to try meditation. I had been to meditation before in the past because that's what you were supposed to do, but I had,
Right.
deemed it an abject failure because I was no good at it because I'd be lying there, in Shavasana making mental to-do lists.
Right.
But this time when it came back around, there was some part of me that like knew I was supposed to try it. So I go to the class. I'm sitting there. There's 6 of us in a dimly lit yoga studio, and the instructor is taking us through a guided meditation. As I'm sitting on the mat, I feel this like well of emotion start bubbling up. And I'm thinking to myself, what is this? What's going on? Right. And I'm trying to control it. I'm trying to hold it down and like, refocus on the meditation. Like, come on, Jen, get your head together, focus. And I can't stop this thing. It's like bubbling up and it's bubbling up. And before I know it, I'm crying. And I'm not talking like crying like with a tear rolling down my cheek. I'm talking about sobbing.
Right.
And the meditation teacher slides a box of Kleenex onto my mat, and I sit there for the whole 90 minutes trying to blow my nose quietly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking to myself, like, I must be losing it. What is going on? Like, I had no idea why I was crying. I had no idea what was happening. And I leave the class. I'm walking out with like 2 mittfuls of snotty Kleenex and mascara streaming down my face. And the meditation teacher, doesn't say a word. She just looks at me and she's smiling and nodding.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then she says to me, "Oh, I'm starting an 8-week series. If you'd like to sign up." And before I even knew what I was doing, I signed up for 8 weeks. And pretty much for most of that 8 weeks, I went in there and cried.
Yeah.
And, somewhere probably around the third or fourth week, I'm like, okay, I obviously have no control here. I am just going to surrender to what was happening. Right. I was going to surrender to what was showing up in my life. I was just like in full surrender because I had no other choice.
Mm.
Right. And
Yeah.
that, looking back on it now, I recognize, that was the first time I had ever really fully and deeply connected with myself. And underneath that, I also recognized that I was grieving a whole pile of things, the death of my mother, like all kinds of things that had happened, and then everything that I had lost. But once I kind of scrape that layer of
Right.
emotion off the top of it, and this again from the work that you do, right? I started to get clearer on who I was. And then I started to search for inspiration. I'm like, okay, where are all the 50-year-old women doing amazing things in the world? Like, where are they? Show them to me. And it was like, oh, crickets, right? If you look at mainstream media, any woman over the age of 40 is portrayed, it's related to bladder leakage protection, retirement
Yeah.
plans, meal replacement shakes. And I'm like, all of that is great, like very needed,
Mm-hmm.
but it tells a teeny tiny fraction of what it means to be a woman in your 50s. And so I decided I was going to go on a mission to like find these women. I knew they had to be out there somewhere. And so I started the podcast as a means to be able to share the stories. Like I needed that inspiration, and I wanted to bring that inspiration to other midlife women who might be in the place that I was. Because when I, first started talking about my story, I started to realize I'm like, I'm not alone. Like there were points where I would look at other people's, supposedly picture perfect lives and go, what's wrong with me? Like there
Mm-hmm.
has to be something wrong with me. Like my husband left, my job doesn't value me, my kid doesn't need me anymore, even my trainer doesn't want to train me. Like there has to be something wrong with me, right?
Yeah.
And when I started sharing that, I was like, other women were telling the same story. And I was like, wow, okay, we are not alone in this, and we all need the same level of inspiration. We all need to see what's possible, because our generation of midlife women is not the same as our mothers and our grandmothers, right? They didn't
Yeah.
have the same options that we do. And so we never had it modeled for us. So how can we now model this for all the other women? Right. And so stepping into this chapter of my life and like really, finding, a mission that I am passionate and excited about, and work that I love in, coaching and podcasting and writing. I if you'd asked me this like 10 years ago, I would have told you it wasn't possible. And here I am. It is my daily reality. So, that's why Old Chicks No Shit was born. And Old Chicks No Shit actually came from like way back in my 20s in the corporate world when we would have new people join the team. We always had this joke about follow the old chicks in my 20s, right? Follow the old chicks because we know some shit. And then, at this time around, I was like, oh, wow, old chicks really do know some shit. Right. And that's how it was born. But it really was a process of unpacking, unlearning everything that I had learned throughout my life to get to the core of who I was as a human being. Who is my soul? What is my heart? In order to be able to create, a life like what I call the kick-ass next chapter, a life that I am truly passionate and excited about, that's aligned with me. My need for freedom, my need for creativity, my love of podcasting, my love of coaching, like all of that stuff together, like that is who I am. And quite honestly, had I had to make the change on my own, I might not have done it. I got forced into that place. You know how they say, the universe gives you a wink, then it gives you a nudge, then it gives you a shove, and if you're not listening, you get the brick in the head. Right. Guess who I am? I'm the brick in the head one, right?
Yeah. I know.
So,
most people don't take the time to get that, or don't have the opportunity. I mean, you don't necessarily want to have to go through a health issue or an event to take the time, but sometimes, like you say, that's what some people need, unfortunately.
Well, and unfortunately, my story is not an uncommon one. No. I hear this same story with different circumstances and events, but it's the point where we have to get to crisis mode before we're forced into that. Mm-hmm. And I want women to know that, you don't have to do that. In fact, I highly recommend you don't do that. Yes. Right? I took the hard road. But if we start building that self-connection, if we start realizing that we have a whole other chapter ahead of us and that we are powerful enough to create whatever it is that we want for that next chapter of life, if we can recognize that and start believing that, we're opening up all kinds of, doors for what are we going to create in this next chapter of our life? It can be anything.
And women need to know, if you haven't been exposed to this world, if you haven't been in the personal development realm, there are ways that you can release emotions. I use the emotion code, but there's tons of other modalities out there. Have a search, look around, look for options to help you know yourself better, or to get your health better, or anything like that, because you don't have to just write it off to being that age. We're getting old. And so that's why I feel like that. Don't just take that for the answer. So many women I know have health issues and they're just writing it off. Oh, it's just because I'm getting older. Maybe that's not what it is. Maybe there's actually something you can do. There's so many options out there right now. So don't just write it off without exploring the options.
Well, and that's the thing. I honestly believe that a huge portion of, my own health journey was, now that I look back on it, of course, hindsight being what it is, there was so much stuck emotion in me that it's no wonder I burnt out. Mm-hmm. I was holding, it's the analogy of holding the beach ball underwater, right? It takes an immense amount of energy to keep it down there, but one way or the other, it's coming up sideways, whichever way, right? But it's coming up. And, when I think about it now and I can see it for what it is, again, the amount of energy that I was expending to hold a lot of stuff in, that it eventually came out without, luckily it was in a meditation class, could have been anywhere, right? But recognizing that we're the creators of our own reality, including our own health, and recognizing that we also have the power to fix that.
Yes. Yeah. And no, we can't really blame ourselves either, because we were
No,
never taught how to deal with emotions.
so
Most of
true.
us were taught tamp it down, get over it, move on. So we're not even really sure what to do with our emotions. And
No,
so they're
that is
stuck
so
in
true.
our body all over. Like in the emotion code, they say that they figure the average adult has about 200 or 300 trapped emotions from every
Oh,
event. So
I
depending on
believe
how
that.
much crap you've gone through, you might have more.
Yeah, that's true. And this whole notion of like, never let them see you cry. And especially as women, I think we're
Hmm.
we're guilty of this, right? Like we have to be strong, we have to hold everything for everybody, right? Never like even in the corporate world, especially, right? Like never let them see you cry, no matter what's going on. I mean, I went through a whole divorce, and I didn't tell a single soul in my office because I didn't want anybody to think of me as less capable or too emotional or whatever. Meanwhile, I was like, dying inside every day, but I was like, nope, we are not showing it.
Yeah.
Right. And we tend to want to show each other that we're strong and we've got it together. Right. No matter
Hmm.
what's happening in our world. And I think we do ourselves such a huge disservice because, if I see, Susie and Mary doing that, well, I can't crack up now because they're not, right?
Yeah.
Whereas,
Yeah.
when we show each other who we really are, like we're giving everybody permission to do the same. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And there is sort of a stigma too out there for asking for help, to
Oh,
get counseling or
mm,
coaching or, whatever kind of thing. Unfortunately, it's still not really mainstream where people
no.
think that it's okay. And the results that you can get when you get the right kind of help are life changing.
Oh, so huge. At one point in my reinvention journey, I finally at some point realized I'm like, okay, if I want my life to be different, then I have to show up differently in it. And I hired a coach at that point. I'd never had any kind of really, exposure to the self-development world or any of that kind of stuff. And I hired a coach. And I would say it was probably the best thing I have ever done for myself. And I continue to have coaches and belong to my mastermind groups to this day. In fact, in my free guide, 5 Ways to Get Unstuck and Create Your Kick-Ass Next Chapter, one of the things I talk about is don't do it alone because it can be really hard when it's just you and your fears and your thoughts and your doubts, right? You need other people to reflect back to you, all of like, how valuable you are, your knowledge, your experience, and your wisdom. Sometimes you need other people to hold your belief for you on the days that you are
Mm.
struggling. So whether it's a coach, whether it's joining a group, I run mastermind groups for midlife women who are in the process of creating something new for their life, right? Like having a group around you to hold you up and support you while you are going through this is probably one of the most critical steps that
Yeah.
we can do. Like I know I would not be where I am today was it not for the help and support of coaches and mastermind groups and other like-minded people.
Yeah. And I think especially when you do it in a group, it's really important because I know, when you go to the first time you go and you've never done this before and you look around the room and you look at that woman across the room and you think, wow, she looks amazing. She looks like she has her whole life together. Like, what's wrong with me? And then people start telling their stories and all of a sudden you're like, wow, it is not
Yeah,
just me. Right? Everybody has a
yeah,
story and it makes you feel maybe better when you're out in the world too, when, people get angry at small things when you're even out and about. It's like you never know what people's backstory is.
yeah. It's so true. It's so true. And I remember even like, going through everything that I was going through. I remember, I was at a party one time and one of my friends said to me, she's like, wow, you make this look so easy. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my goodness, what a lie. Because I am like struggling so hard here to hold it all together. But on the outside, again, it's like we talked about, like, was all pretty, you know what I mean? Never let them see you
Mhm.
cry.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I thought to myself, like, wow, what a lie. I'm living a lie.
Right. I know. I know.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. And well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today, Jennifer, because I know there's going to be women out there that will be inspired. Everybody has gifts to share, and
Yes.
just know that we need you to share your gifts. And everybody's been through stuff. Maybe your stuff's bigger, maybe your stuff's not as big, but it doesn't matter. Find a
No.
way to get it out there and, take this time to really do what you want next.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this time of our life is really about a refocusing from, everything that's outside of us, like our families, our careers, and everything, to what's inside of us and finding like our authentic truths so that we can share our gifts with the world. So,
Yes. So, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you if they want to learn more about you and what you do?
yeah, so you can reach out to me from my website, which is oldchicksnoshit.com. You can email me. I always love emails from people. And Jennifer at oldchicksnoshit.com. And then you can find me on Facebook and on Instagram with the same name.
Awesome.
So come join the community.
Great. And we will have all that in the show notes. So if you don't remember while you're listening, that's okay. It's all there for you. So thank you, Jennifer, again for joining me today and everybody for listening in. And just remember, it's never too late.